Hello everybody, welcome to Ask Rusty Bucket. Subscribe to the channel if you have not already and drop a like on this video. It only takes 1 second. It makes a massive difference on how the video performs in the YouTube algorithm. So we are back doing hot takes. Yeah, hot takes. I never know how to intro these. Rudy said by calling to action, so comment your hot take down below and like the ones you want to see. SGA's ceiling is top 5 point guard of all time. I'm confident he will achieve this. It's weird. I still think of Shea as a shooting guard, even though he's been a point guard for the last 2 seasons, just because he is such a shoot-first player. Even though that also isn't necessarily something that makes me think you're not a point guard. I don't know. If it's just that he has a more shooting guard game and he's just like an okay playmaker, either way, he's definitely someone who would have been a shooting guard in the previous era of the NBA, but now gets converted to a point. Maybe someone made that point in a really good video essay out there somewhere. Who knows? Top 5 of all time? Sure. I think that's achievable. Like, honestly, as far as the point guard position goes, no offense to the other all-time greats, but like after Steph and Magic, I don't know if there's like a crazy high ceiling for point guards. Like, those guys are the only ones who are in the top 10 of all time, and I don't know how many are in the top 20 really. You know, it's especially in mine. Like, I think Chris Paul would be who I consider the 3rd best point guard ever, and he's not in my top 20. He's probably somewhere in the 20s, maybe even in the 30s. So I do think that he could be a top 5 point guard of all time. That is achievable because it's not that impressive. I think the 5th best point guard is probably worse than the 5th best player at just about every other position. I'd have to look into that, but I think that's true. Giannis is overrated, and the only reason he has a ring is because KD's toe was on the 3-point line and the Bucks got lucky with their opponent's injuries. Giannis has been a perennial choker in the playoffs, but he gets a pass since he has a ring. First of all, I despise, and I mean despise, this take about because KD's toe was on the 3-point line. Yep, it was. That's what happened. And then the results transpired. You can't just say, if a thing didn't happen, something would have been different. That's not a take. That's fucking obvious. But he didn't hit a 3, he hit a long 2 with his foot on the line, so they went into overtime, and then he missed all of his shots in that overtime. My point being, this is stupid. This is what-ifism to the worst degree. As for the injuries, that's a valid argument. You can lead with that, not this stupid stepping on the 3-point line shit. Giannis has been a perennial choker in the playoffs. He choked before in the playoffs, before that point in his career. He has not choked since. The reason that he has not made the finals has not been because Giannis choked. In the playoffs versus the Heat last year, he played pretty solid given that he was dealing with an injury. The team was just on the back foot by the time he got there, and he wasn't able to get them to win against a Heat team that was on fucking fire from outside, by the way, and Jimmy Butler was scoring like 38 points a game, by the way. Just an outlier series across the board, and he played fine. And in the series versus the Boston Celtics, he played fine. His player was hurt. He only had Drew Holiday out there taking step-back threes like he's James Harden, shooting below 30% on them. He has not had the proper circumstances to go on a run since his finals run. Sure, maybe he wouldn't have made it if the Nets were healthy, but that's the reality of every fucking playoff run that has ever happened to some degree. There are higher degrees between them, and it's worthy of pointing out, no doubt. It's not enough to just say that he's a super overrated player and he's not actually good in the playoffs. The guy had 50 points in a closeout finals game. I don't want to fucking hear it. Hot take, a Q&A series would be better than a hot take series. I don't know about that one, but that's something we could potentially explore. But the best thing about the hot take series is that you guys get to say something batshit crazy, and then I can title this video something batshit crazy, and then people will click on it because it's batshit crazy. I don't know how easily I can format that to a Q&A series, but I don't know, maybe we'll see. If Derrick Rose stayed healthy with the consistent development of the Bulls roster, they would have beaten the Heat in a 7-game series in 2014. Derrick Rose was on an all-time great trajectory and was playing the best basketball he would ever play before his injury in 2011. If he was able to develop for another 3 years, there's no telling how good he could be. Pair that with the Defensive Player of the Year Joakim Noah, Carlos Boozer as a supporting piece, a developing Jimmy Butler, and Coach Tom Thibodeau, they could have taken the Heat. The Miami Heat in 2014, where they were a weaker version of themselves because Dwayne Wade just wasn't who he used to be, that's definitely something that I could see, as a team that would be vulnerable to 3 years further on developed from his MVP Derrick Rose. Carlos Boozer was never someone I liked as a Bull, but he is technically a good player. Joakim Noah was Defensive Player of the Year in 2014. Excellent playmaking center, even though he can't score worth shit. Coach Tom Thibodeau, good coach for that era. I think he's still a good-ish coach now. Pretty good coach, but I think he was especially right for that era. The current NBA clashes with his ideology, but in 2011, he was cooking, other than leaving Derrick Rose in a little bit too long. That didn't really bode well with his ideology. Sure, I could see that for sure. KD, Kyrie, and Tracy McGrady, amongst other greats, are great examples of super talented basketball players that lack leadership skills to be among the top players at their position. And no, KD is not better than Bird. Correct, KD is not better than Bird. And I agree with that for the most part. I think something that we routinely have seen with Kevin Durant is that he just lacks leadership and doesn't really have the same sway and influence on his teammates that a lot of other superstar players do. Like, don't get me wrong, it's still very clear who the top dogs are on his team when it is clearly him, but there is still just a lack of seeming like everyone's falling in line for this guy, and he's said himself that he's not a leader, which weirdly, this is something we didn't really harp on the Kevin Durant video. It could have been something to be more critical of. It's up for debate, really, how important this is in terms of how you get ranked as a basketball player. I think that's an interesting conversation, because I think to be one of the true, top of the line all-time greats, you probably have to be a good leader to some degree, regardless of what that method may be. At least someone who's more vocal and adamant and communicative, where Kevin Durant is pretty quiet, it seems, other than when he's on Twitter. I don't know how so many NBA fans continue to overlook Tim Duncan. It's just lame in general how great players who don't have a flashy personality and or style of play appear to be put on a lower pedestal than those who do. I think as long as people are appreciating and understanding how good Tim Duncan was, then that's as far as it has to go. As long as we're there and we're not disrespecting him, as people very often do, then I'm all good. I completely understand and don't really get upset about the fact that Duncan is not the most popular in the world, because the reality is basketball is entertainment. The reason people watch the sport is to be entertained or to find a way to make yourself seem smart and better than everybody. If you're going to do it just for the entertainment part and not that other part, Tim Duncan's not really going to wow you that much. Solid fundamental play, even if you enjoy it, it's not going to be the same as someone who's got a lot of flashy moves, and that's fine. That's just the way that it is. That's the way it's always going to be. As long as we can actually objectively, as close as possible, look at Tim Duncan, then it's fine. That's just the way that it is, man. That's the way it's always going to be. If you act boring, people are going to think you're boring. That's your own damn fault, really. Hot take: Tim Duncan is clearly better all time than Kobe. People just overvalue scoring, but Kobe isn't that much better of a scorer to make up for the fact that Tim is better at literally everything else. Tim's not a better playmaker. He's definitely a better rebounder and defensive player by a pretty significant margin, even though Kobe is a great defender in his own right. Tim Duncan is a much worse scorer than Kobe. Much worse. He has if it's not worse, it's pretty much exactly the same if I'm recalling, in his peak years true shooting percentage. He was a good scorer, but he wasn't a great one. He's probably one of the weakest scorers of the top 10 players of all time. I think maybe Magic Johnson and Bill Russell are the only players that I would have as worse scorers than Tim Duncan who are in that tier. Kobe had higher volume while being a little bit more efficient as a guard rather than a big man. And again, he is a better playmaker just because he's a guard rather than a big man. Tim Duncan's better at big man stuff, believe it or not. I think they are very similar all-time talents with very similar resumes. So I'm just going to have to disagree with you on that one. I think they're very close. I kind of flip-flop between them. I really think it's as close to tied as it can get. Derrick White would be an all-time great player if he played any time from the beginning of the league to the 90s. He has a solid all-around game and more advanced skills than many other players from those eras. Sure, but that's just if you're teleporting him with his modern conditioning and modern techniques and modern training, modern understanding of basketball, and you're teleporting that into the past. Whereas if Derrick White grew up in the 60s, played basketball in the 80s, that would be a very different version of him because of the basketball zeitgeist around him. So that's just not, I feel like that factor is left out of this all the time. It's like, yeah, if a super skilled player from today was teleported back then and had the modern understanding of the game and was able to use that against the old ideals, absolutely that player would kick ass. Although it's also worth mentioning that, like, although Derrick White's not the craziest high-volume three-point shooter, you know, the three-point shooting player teleporting back to the past thing that people do, like, it's very well possible that that player would immediately get shut down by whatever coach he has saying, don't do that shit, and that ultimately hinders them. I believe, is it Sharif Abdul Rahim, or no, it's Mahmoud Abdul Rauf? Anyways, that guy, he shot a bunch of threes early on in the NBA and, like, caught a bunch of grief for it, but he was really the only one who broke through at all. So I am curious how that would translate as well. But anyways, my overall point, players are more skilled today because what we know about developing skills is more advanced. That's just humanity advancing. That's it. I think Dame would be just as highly regarded if he was drafted to the Warriors instead of Steph, and he would have won just as many chips. No, that's stupid. I hate that take. It's not true. Not even a little bit. Dame's not nearly the shooter that Stephen Curry is, and the shooter that Stephen Curry is the reason that the Warriors were as dominant as they were, and that does very much translate to the degree of even a 6% difference in their three-point percentage. Like, Dame, I believe, has never shot over 40% from three, or if he did, it was literally like 1, maybe 2 seasons, whereas Stephen Curry has 1 season, his entire career, where he shot below 40% from three, and he shot 39%, and it was on like 13 attempts a game. Dame is not as good of a shooter as Steph. He's not nearly as good of a playmaker as Steph. He's not as good of a ball handler as Steph. He's maybe not even as good of a finisher as Steph. He's more explosive. He can dunk. But I don't know about finishing at the rim percentages. I feel like Steph is probably in a similar ballpark. Steph's just a way better player. And I just hate because Dame is in the archetype of player that Steph is, that means that he can hang in the same role. It's not what that means. He is B+, maybe on his best days an A- Steph. I mean, really his best fucking days. It's just not the same. And that's okay. Dame doesn't have to be Steph. He can still be an all-time great player without being one of the 10 greatest players of all time. The NBA should bring back nickname jerseys every 5 years or so. I don't know, I think it'd be cool to do it somewhat regularly. Maybe have like a couple of teams do it each year, so like different teams rotate it, but whatever. Yeah, I definitely liked that. It was really cute. I especially liked it with the Miami Heat, like Jesus Shuttlesworth for Ray Allen and stuff like that. I think, what was LeBron's pick? Was it King or Chosen or something like that? Something corny. It's LeBron. Tyrese Maxey is a bad pick for most improved player. I hate when they choose players that were already good that just became better. Guys like Kobe White and Jonathan Kuminga started the season on the outskirts and have made their way into starting lineups on competitive teams through hard work. Give it to one of them. I don't mind the good player to great one most improved player. I prefer the mid player to good one most improved player. But it doesn't have to be that way. It's more about just who improved more. And I think between Tyrese Maxey and Kobe White, I think Kobe White dramatically, I think he has 10 more points per game or something like that. Not 10 more. It's like 7, 8 more. And Tyrese Maxey, it's like 3. The assist difference is not that much more. Like, Tyrese Maxey definitely got a lot better this year, no doubt. But there are a couple of players who improved more than Tyrese Maxey did. I agree with you on that one for sure. That's me as a huge Tyrese Maxey fan. I know people think I'm a huge Sixers hater, but Tyrese Maxey is one of my favorite players in the league. He's really fun to watch because of how fast he is. Hot take, I think Rusty would look badass with a handlebar mustache. I'm going to have to disagree with you on that one. I do not like handlebar mustaches on anybody, let alone myself. I wish also I could grow a good mustache. If I had a good mustache, I would have a mustache, but it looks weird without the beard. I look creepy and terrifying. This is what it's gonna be forever. I will never change this. Jimmy Butler is better than Embiid because he has been beating him or getting farther in the playoffs nearly every year after leaving Philly, and the best players are the ones who rise to the occasion and put up big numbers when needed most. There's a degree of truth in what you're saying. I think the problem is just that Jimmy Butler is elevating to the level that Embiid is capable of producing on a normal day. Like, elevated Jimmy Butler is as good as regular season Joel Embiid is, maybe. Embiid just consistently plays worse in the playoffs than he did in the regular season. Injuries have been a huge factor in that throughout his entire career, though. I don't know. It's a hard thing to say. I understand your point of view, and I am someone who really values the playoffs, but, you know, you can't just discount someone averaging 36, 12, and 7. That's nothing to just throw away, even if it is the regular season. And I don't like this mentality that like completely discounts that. If you want to say I'll take Jimmy Butler over Embiid in a playoff series, I think I can go for that. A fully healthy, ready to go Joel Embiid, though, it'd be a coin toss at least for me. I guess it's really dependent on the matchup that he's got. James Harden never actually had a legit chance to win a title, so he should not be judged for not having a ring. I think James Harden would have a ring if Kevin Durant didn't go to the Warriors, because I am pretty confident that the Houston Rockets would have beat the Warriors in 2018, and I'm very confident that Rockets team would have beaten the Cavaliers. Unfortunately, though, they had Kevin Durant, and they also went 0 for 27 from 3 in the Game 7, so that's rough. Ultimately, I truly believe that getting that series to a Game 7 was more impressive than not a lot, but some teams' championships. There are some years where the title that they got is probably less impressive than just winning 3 games in a playoff series against that Warriors team. And I'm being dead serious. That's how fucking good the Kevin Durant Warriors were and how fucking unbeatable they were. But yeah, James Harden, I do think that he is a little unfairly judged at times. I think part of that is some of his stands put him in conversations that are really annoying that I don't think he belongs in. Miss me with that James Harden over Dwayne Wade take. I hate that shit. Not that he should not be judged. I don't know how to feel about that, because you're always going to be judged for that, even if you truly had no fucking chance whatsoever every year. And he didn't have no chance every year. There were a couple of years where he had star to superstar production, and his team could have gone far in the playoffs, and they just didn't, either because of his shortcomings or something else. So judge him a little bit. That's it. Shout out to Nick for editing this video, and goodbye.